Hi, I'm Mia Friedman, and welcome to No Filter. When Maggie Alderson writes her books, she never knows how they'll end. She says, there's a woman who has a job and she has an issue. That's all I start with. Pretty much describes all of us, doesn't it? Maggie has written 10 novels, including her latest, The Centerview. In the decades of writing columns about style, she's also given some of the best fashion advice you've ever read. And you know why it's so great? Because Maggie cares less about how clothes look on her and more about how they make her feel. I met Maggie when she became my boss at Clio, where we worked together in the 90s. Lisa Wilkinson, who was the editor, my first boss, had gone on maternity leave, and Maggie came in from the UK like a small English hurricane full of energy and ideas and this infectious desire to be bold and naughty in all aspects of her life. Well after she'd left Clio and returned to the UK, she was the one I called when I was offered a weekly newspaper column because she was the only woman I knew back then who had one. How do you write a column every week, I wanted to know. And I still use her advice when I talk to writers at Mamma Mia about their work. Maggie and I even had our own fashion victim adventure that got a bit out of control and ended up with her in hospital nearly requiring an amputation. True story. More about that in our interview. Fashion and fiction aside, Maggie had a lot more on her mind that day when I called her at home. Her internet was down, which makes the quality of some of our conversation a little bit patchy, so please bear with us. She lives in a village outside of London with her husband and teenage daughter, Peggy. She opens up about what it's like to be the ham in the middle of the sandwich generation and her worries about having an only child. Here's Maggie Alderson. Congratulations on the book. I love it.
Thank you. So did you?
I really love it. It's really, it's about issues that I haven't read about before, and it's a heroine in a life stage that I haven't read about before. And I loved that idea of the sandwich generation and someone with older children, and Polly's just a wonderful character. She's just fantastic.
Can I burst into tears? I'm so happy.
Where did the idea and the themes for this novel come from? Because it feels like a shift for you into, I don't know, something a bit different.
Well, I think what is different is that it has this very constant theme through it, the perfume theme, which I've never done anything quite so structured before, because I'm not one of those authors that maps out my plot on index cards. I completely make it up as I go along. I've got no idea what's going to happen when I start a book.
Do you really not know? So what do you start with? I mean, you've written 10 novels now. This is your 10th. How do you start?
I start with pictures. I go through magazines and I tear out pictures of people. I start with a woman. A woman comes into my mind, and it always starts with what she does for a living. So I have an idea of her, and I have an idea of the general area subject that I want to look at. So it might be having had a terrible father, or having a husband who doesn't want to have kids, so there's an issue. So there's a woman who has a job and there's an issue. That's all I start with.
A woman with a job and an issue sounds like all of us.
Yeah, exactly.
You're one of Australia's most successful novelists, so we kind of feel like you're our own. But your relationship with Australia started from a particularly annus horribilis that you had in, was it 1992?
Yeah.
What brought you to Australia?
Sex. That's the main reason. That's the short version.
I'd forgotten about that. Sex, yes. Sex and a job and an issue.
Well, I had the sex first and the job came afterwards.
Did you know much about Australia?
No, not really. My main connection with it was my friendship with Cathy Lett, who I'd met in London. So, and anything connected with Cathy seemed like a very good idea, which it turned out to be. And I had read quite a lot of Australian books, so I had this connection with it, but I didn't know a lot about the real Australia that I encountered when I got there, and I just fell in love immediately.
You were a fashion magazine editor during the rise of the supermodels, weren't you? What was that like, that time in fashion?
Well, it was wonderful. They were really, really glory days. I'm sure if I was 26 and in fashion now, I would like to think I'd be an Instagrammer working for BuzzFeed if I wasn't working for you. And so I'm sure there are still glory days, but it was a very exciting time to be there. And I was at that famous Versace show where the four of them came down the runway to George Michael's Freedom, and they'd all been in the video. And it was one of those moments when you thought, I'm at the centre of the fashion universe at this very moment. And it was really fun. One time, Mia, I stood behind Anna Wintour in the queue for the loo in the horrible, horrible convention centre in Milan. And I stood there thinking, I really ought to say something to her, but I didn't. I thought I'll let her have some privacy. She's about to have a pee.
And she does a pee too. Yeah, that's fascinating. What did you wear to the shows? Like, did you have a uniform? I can't imagine the pressure.
Oh, Mia, the pressure's appalling. I pretty much wore black, and I did have a uniform. You know, each season I'd have my sort of anchor pieces, and my helmet Lang suit stood me in very good stead. For me, it's always more about how I feel in clothes rather than what I see in the mirror. And certain things, I just get them on and I feel like the best me. And so I had to have that feeling for everybody, even the absolute show ponies. I've talked to all kinds of people about this. You have mornings at the shows when you just think you're going to die because you've got nothing to wear, because you just feel sick, you've got spots, you seem to have put on. Well, I usually did put on about 5 kilos in Milan because the food's so good. Nothing fits. So yeah, that side of it is stressful, but black is my standby.
Do you still read magazines?
Not nearly as much as I used to, and it kills me to say that. And the ones that I tend to read more are interiors magazines, because I'm doing a house up. And in the UK, we have amazing free magazines with newspapers. And one of my favourite magazines is called The Stylist, and that's given away in London on Tuesday evening. And I go up to London at least once a week, and I try and make it a Tuesday so I can get my copy of The Stylist. It's absolutely brilliant. So I do read them, but not nearly as much as I used to.
When you look at your daughter Peggy, who's 15, and what she's influenced by, can you really see that living expression of how the influence of magazines has just been translated to Instagram?
100%, absolutely 100%. It's extraordinary. She turned up in a look the other day. She'd found a pair of old fishnet tights of mine with that really massive gauge fishnet, about 4 centimetres, 2 centimetres across. And she put that on underneath her jeans and pulled it up really high, and then worn a cropped top and with her jeans with the slashes at the knees, and it looked incredible. And I took an Instagram picture of her, and it wasn't until a couple of days later that I saw that look of the fishnets under jeans. I thought she was a genius. She got it off Instagram. So 100%.
I saw that she also did a very interesting thing with one of her eyebrows that you put on Instagram.
Oh, my Lord.
Is that a new thing?
Apparently. Didn't Luke Perry do it in the 1990s?
Oh, I don't know. It's like when you just make a little... what do you even say? You shave a little part in the centre of your eyebrow.
Yeah. She said it's a 90s thing, and her gang, her generation, are absolutely obsessed with the 1990s, which thrills me to the core, because I think the 1990s, were was a wonderful decade. She is obsessed with Friends. She's watched, I think, every episode.
Yes.
And
Luca was obsessed with Friends a few years ago as well. Isn't it funny?
It's that like I used to watch I Love Lucy when I was young.
Yeah.
So, about the olden days. And so maybe they feel like, the 90s was the olden days. And she loves the fact that I've still got some bits and bobs from the 90s, and she absolutely falls upon them.
The 90s when you were in Sydney, of course, and I remember, do you remember at lunchtime at Clio one time we went out to get piercings?
I do, and I ended up in hospital.
The true definition of a fashion victim.
I nearly lost my ear.
You nearly lost your ear. I got my belly button pierced. You got your ear, but your cartilage, and they didn't warn you that that's like a really high-risk place to get pierced.
Well, and what I didn't occur to me is that I'd had all the lymph nodes taken out of that side of my head.
When you had cancer?
They didn't say to me, be careful about infections in the left side of your head. If I'd had it on the other ear, I would have been fine. So that was interesting experience. And if it hadn't been to that, I wouldn't have read A Suitable Boy, which somebody from Clear, I can't remember who, brought to me in the hospital.
You were in hospital for quite some time, 2 weeks, I seem to recall.
God. Something good always comes out of something bad. And I met some amazing people on that ward. Great. It was great material.
You returned to England in 2001 and I never knew whether you were going to have children or not. You didn't have Peggy until you were 42. Did you think for a while, I'm not going to be a mother, or did you always feel that you would?
Oh, I was absolutely convinced I wasn't going to be, and it was really difficult, really, really difficult for me, because my first husband didn't want to have children, which is, inspired my book, How to Break Your Own Heart. That was, to an extent, none of the details of the book, but the theme was my story with him. But, I kept thinking that he'd grow up and realize he did want children. And when I finally accepted that no, he didn't, is when I finally found the courage to leave him, to end the relationship. And so I thought, and then it took me a little while to meet my current husband, and I just thought I'd left it too late. And just before I left Australia, it was all part of my reasons for leaving. Actually, I was about to start IVF, and I couldn't go through with it because a friend of mine in New York was having it, and she was emailing me every day and telling me about what she was going through and the effects the hormones are having on her. And I just thought, I've got to accept it. I'm having an amazing life. I will continue to have an amazing life, and children aren't in my path. So when Peggy came along, it was just, most wonderful, wonderful, wonderful surprise.
You've said before that you were worried when you had her that you knew she was going to be an only child, because obviously at 42 it was unlikely that you'd get pregnant again. And you sort of said that there are lots of stereotypical things associated with only children, being spoilt or precocious. How's it worked out?
It does make me sad, because I'm from a family of 4, and I know how much fun we had in between, smashing each other's toys and beating each other up. It was really fun, and I'm really close to my siblings and all my wonderful nieces and nephews. So it does make me sad that she'll never have a true niece or nephew. I think it's probably been much better and easier for her than maybe, when I was young, I only knew one only child. Whereas now it's so common. We've got so many friends who only have one child. And we have other friends, like some of our probably our sort of best friends as a family. The husband has a daughter from his first marriage, and she's 23 or something. So their son together is the same age as Peggy. So he's like an only child, and they are such good friends. And there's another the friends in New York who's having IVF ended up adopting, and her son is my daughter's other best friend. So I think for her generation, it's really different. She would love to have siblings, and she used to fantasize about it a lot when she was little, and tell people that she had, 4 brothers and sisters and 25 horses, and lived in the country.
You've written really beautifully about the process of becoming invisible as you get older as a woman. How's that going?
I think it is definitely happening, but I don't really care. And in some ways, it's quite not. My superpower has always, the superpower I've always wanted is invisibility. So in some ways, be careful what you wish for. But sometimes I quite enjoy it. And one of the things I love about it is that you can chat really freely to young men without any worry that they think you're coming on something. I used to have the most wonderful hairdresser. He was about 25 when I met him, and he was just so adorable. I absolutely loved him. And I could chat away to a guy like anything. And knowing that he didn't think I was flirting with him, just mates. And I really enjoy that. But I think what I may lack in visibility, I make up for in audibility. I can be quite loud, opinionated.
That's interesting. It is a process I'm finding it myself where you just give less fucks, don't you, about what other people think. Yeah,
and it's kind of, who are you invisible to? I mean, I'm clearly completely invisible to young men now, unless I've got a reason to engage with them, like my hairdresser or some people's sons. But that's fine. I don't think I'm invisible to women of my own age.
Not at all.
And I know I'm invisible to gay men of my age, and those are the groups of people that I most want to talk to. So that suits me.
Do you still have fun with fashion? Or do you feel that... I found that my own mother, she's 70 now, and I've seen it in a lot of women where they just become really despondent and they sort of stop expressing themselves with clothes. They sort of just accept, I don't know, that they wear these drab, boring clothes now, and it doesn't make them happy, but they feel that there's no other way.
I don't think that will ever happen to me, because my aforementioned 94-year-old mother has just become in possession of a bright yellow raincoat. And, she works in a costume jewellery look like no one. She's absolutely across it, and she loves it. And so I don't think I will ever lose an interest in expressing myself through clothes. And obviously, because I sit alone in a room all day talking to myself, I don't make a massive effort during the day, but I always put makeup on. I always put jewellery on.
That's an effort.
No, I've got really, really bad skin now. I've got terrible rosacea, so I have to put makeup on. Otherwise, I really can't bear to look at myself. And it just makes me. And I put perfume on. You've written
a lot about your rosacea and the effect that it has on how you feel.
It's horrible. Yeah. Absolutely horrible. I have the sort of acne form. Some women have, and men get it as well, but it's mainly women I talk to about it, get the very bad facial flushing, which I get a little bit. For me, it's like, spots. And they're not the same as acne spots, but they have gradient, they stick out from your face, and you can't hide them with makeup because they cast a shadow. It's horrible. It's really horrible. And I can't drink coffee. Oh. I shouldn't drink white wine, but I still do sometimes. But stress is the worst thing for it.
Are there any products that you found that help?
That French range, Aven, they do a whole range for rougeur, as it is in French, and I find them really good. That's my favourite product range, and they do a really good mask, and there's a pimple cream that makes them go crusty and then they fall off. And then I'll have a few days of having normal skin, and then back it comes. It's an absolute bastard.
Mags, I'm asking all the women in my life about Botox and fillers and work and stuff because, you know, I'm at that age. I'm past that age, really. Do you have it, and how do you feel about it?
No way.
Oh, see, I thought you'd totally say, yes, I have Botox. What's wrong with it? Doesn't matter. It's like dyeing your hair.
I don't want to look like a non-stick frying pan. Unless I can afford to go to if I could go to Helen Mirren's surgeon, or whoever she goes to, maybe it's a yogi, I'll have what she's having. But I don't feel comfortable with anybody. I can't be bothered. I can barely get my nails done. I don't have the time. And I think when you've had a lot of surgery, as I have, I tell you what, to be completely honest, I would have a breast reduction. I'm trying to save up for one, but I need to build an extension on my house. That's going to happen first. But if I can just get enough money together, I would have a breast reduction because my boobs are completely out of control.
You've always had huge boobs, and you're very small.
I've always,
and
now they're just falling. Yeah. They're really uncomfortable, and they make me look fat, and it's a pain.
No one tells you that your boobs grow as you get older.
Oh my Lord! It's really, really awful.
So
some women shrink.
I know. I've heard that.
It seems to be whatever you don't want happens.
Well, it's hard for those women who've had boob jobs in their 20s or 30s, and then they hit their 40s or their 50s, and then suddenly, whoosh, they get all huge and they've got these implants in, and suddenly they're falling over on their face.
Yeah. Yeah, having had a lot of medical surgery, to have it just for vanity, I just couldn't face it because I know what it's like. And I've also been told by a very senior doctor that general anaesthetics are really bad for you.
Are they?
And unless you really, really need to have one, avoid it.
Oh, I used to
but I would the boob job.
Boob job, yeah. There used to be, there's always been a lot of commentary around the fashion industry and its influence on body image, its negative influence on the body image, particularly of young women, and that's a crusade of mine for a long time. Watching it through, you've always been a real defender of the fashion industry. Now watching Peggy, do you feel differently than the way you did when you were in magazines? And also, do you think Instagram is worse?
I've never been a defender of the super, super disgustingly thin catwalk models. And I'll never forget seeing a Giorgio Armani show for the first time, and I felt sick how thin the girls were. And he used models you didn't see on any other catwalks, and that I found disgusting. So I've never defended that. But it's interesting how it's changed, because my daughter's generation, it's like when they say, "Does my bum look big in this?" they want you to say yes. And one of her friends, she said, like, "Oh, X has got the biggest bum in the school." And I went, "Oh, poor guy." She went, "No, she's so lucky." So
right.
I think the human condition is always to want what you haven't got, and it is it is unfortunate when it leads to eating disorders and self-harming, which obviously it still does. And I think Instagram does put horrendous pressure on them. Peggy photographs herself on Snapchat about 20 times a second. They are the most photographed generation ever. And it's like every facial expression is put on Snapchat. I find it very peculiar.
It is peculiar, isn't it? I'm in that gap between Luca's too old and the little ones aren't on it yet. But there comes an age with a young girl where you notice them noticing themselves and sort of becoming entranced with their own reflection.
Yeah. Yes, we've definitely got that going on. But it's not so much the reflection in the mirror as the reflection in the phone.
Yeah, exactly. The phone has replaced the mirror.
And the special faces that are pulled, and, it's... I do take her phone away from her now and again, but probably not as much as I could, because I want her to be part of her own generation.
Mm.
And I've got friends who haven't let their kids watch any television, and well, maybe that has been good for them, but I also think it's good for them to be able to talk about the latest episode of American Horror Story or whatever they've been watching.
Yeah, it's an important socialization tool, and also the internet is life. Like, you can't hold that off forever. You have to teach them how to use it and how to navigate it.
Yeah, and I had an interesting insight with Peggy recently. She doesn't read books, which has been very, very difficult for me to cope with. And I've tried leaving them lying around the house. I've tried getting her cousins and her aunt, who she adores, and other people she knows. That one of her godmothers is a major publisher. I've tried to get them to get, and nothing works. And it's almost become the more I try and make her read, the more she won't. So I've given up.
Hey, lots of love and congratulations. I'm
Thank you. It's
so thrilled with this
chat.
book. It's gorgeous to chat, and I miss you. And are you coming to Australia anytime soon?
Yes.
When?
Ta-da! I'm coming late August, early September.
Fantastic.
I can't wait.
Thanks for listening to No Filter. You can buy Maggie's books, all 15 of them. She's written 10 novels, including The Centerview, her latest, and 4 non-fiction and 1 children's book. You'll find them all at iBooks at apple.co/Mamma Mia. You can also buy Work-Strife Balance there. And you can also, while you're there, it's such a handy little place to go, you can subscribe to all of our other shows in one place. And I bet you haven't subscribed to all of them, because probably since you've been listening to this podcast, we've launched 4 more. And that's where you'll find them. However, you would already know this if you have our Mamma Mia podcast app. It's the best place to find all our podcasts. And if you want to suggest a guest, ask me a question, leave a comment, sing a song, just vent about something, you can call the pod phone on 02 899 9386. And we listen to all of those messages, and sometimes we compile them into a little special correspondence episode that we put through our feeds. So you might even hear yourself through these very earphones. You can also just flick us an email anytime at podcast@mammamia.com.au. I have a newsletter called Work-Strife Balance, and you can subscribe to that at miafriedman.com. And if you're still listening, you should also know that today's show is produced by Elissa Ratliff, who is a huge Maggie Alderson fan and was very excited about this interview for the Mamma Mia Women's Network. The executive producer of podcasts is Monique Bowley, and the head of entertainment is Holly Wainwright. I'm Mia Friedman. I'll see you on the internets. Lots of love.